I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian from the time I was very young. Fortunately, my family never said, you can't do that. They were always very encouraging, so I had no reason to think that I couldn't do it.
Girls make their mind up very early about veterinary medicine. By the time they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years of age, they've already decided this is what they want to do. I've got a 9-year-old granddaughter lives in Kansas City, and her response is, I'm going to be a veterinarian.
I did want to take animal husbandry in high school, and they wouldn't let me. They said, go take home ec. I said, no, thank you. It's just something I always wanted to do. I've been called a little bit stubborn, so.
Dr. Betty Self overcame many man-made obstacles along her journey to becoming a veterinarian, a career that 50 years ago women weren't supposed to pursue. Ultimately, she turned out to be a pioneer in the field, which now boasts more female than male students. When she began treating small animals in Ada in 1957, she became Oklahoma's first practicing female veterinarian.
It was in this building on the west side of town, going out to Sandy Creek Drive, that was built in 1942.
Before she treated a single animal as a licensed veterinarian, Betty endured wave after wave of gender discrimination, which originated in her home state of Texas. After she obtained a pre-veterinary degree from John Tarleton College in Stephenville, Texas, she set her sights on veterinary school. There were only 17 vet colleges in the United States at that time, and students were almost required to stay in their home states for such programs. This limited Betty's option to Texas A&M. There was only one problem. In 1953, Texas A&M only admitted male students.
When I graduated from high school, I applied for at Texas A&M for vet school, and they said, we're working on it, but you can't go. So they suggested I go to John Tarleton then and do my pre-vet work. So I went there, and when I graduated from there, I again applied to Texas A&M, and they still were not taking women in the program.
Where women were actually disenfranchised from being veterinarians. There were lots of barriers put up to keep them from entering the profession. It wasn't just veterinary medicine, there were other professions as well.
Frustrated, Betty realized the predicament she was in. She was one woman daring to gain entry into an all-male institution. It was a lonely and challenging place to be, so she began searching for other avenues and soon found one that would lead her to Stillwater, Oklahoma.
I don't think anybody was really pushing it. In fact, I was ready to enroll at Texas Tech when I finally got the word that then Oklahoma A&M would take me into the vet school program there. The Board of Regents of Oklahoma and the Board of Regents of Texas got together and made a contract for Oklahoma to take me. And they paid the out-of-state part of the tuition for me to go up there. And I didn't care where I went, so I went. In fact, the first time I saw Stillwater is when I went up to start school.
In 1953, Betty would become only the second woman ever admitted into the veterinary school at Oklahoma A&M. She wasn't sure what to expect from her male classmates when she arrived for her first semester, but she was soon put at ease.
For me, it didn't seem any different because my classmates were great. There was never any problem that I had with any of them. And they just accepted me as one of the bunch, and we went on. And I think the wives were a little leery to start with because they weren't sure what, it would be, but there was never any problem. They were all great at the end of it. I thanked them all for accepting me, without any reservations. They didn't make me feel like I was something different in the class, so it was great.
In Oklahoma State, we started about 1948, and Oklahoma State had a dean at that time named Clarence McElroy. Interesting to me, as I've studied Dr. McElroy and read the history about him, Dr. McElroy had a great deal of tolerance associated with him, and I think he had a strong social conscience. because of the leadership of Dr. McElroy and the faculty. I think this was a nurturing place, and I think despite what might be the norm outside of the veterinary school, this was an open and welcoming place.
Betty found more than an education at Oklahoma A&M. She also met her future husband Leon there.
Well, we were in the same class, but we were in different groups. So the first time I really remember talking to him was I was dissecting one half of the side of the horse, and he was dissecting on the other side. So it's when we got to know each other. We got married between our sophomore and junior years.
In the spring of 1957, Betty became only the second woman to graduate from veterinary college at Oklahoma A&M. As an interesting side note, Texas A&M's program wouldn't graduate its first woman until 1966. With diplomas in hand, Betty and Leon prepared to enter practice together. Unbeknownst to them, the couple once again blazed a trail, becoming the first ever husband and wife practice in Oklahoma. They found a professional home in Ada, and that gave Betty the best of both worlds.
When we got out, at that time, you had to go into the service or work for the government or be pregnant. So I happened to be pregnant. And so we were thinking about going to Indiana for him to work with the government when we found out about the opening for a veterinarian in Ada. Dr. Don Williams had contacted the school. So we went down there to interview with him and stayed. So it was great because it gave me a chance. We always had multiple veterinarians in the practice. So I have always practiced, but I was able to take time off when I had the kids and to, do things with their programs and everything when they were in school. So it worked out great.
For the next 24 years, Betty treated small animals at the clinic on Sandy Creek Drive, while Leon tended to horses and livestock. To her relief, Betty quickly discovered that being Oklahoma's first and only practicing female veterinarian wasn't much of an issue. There were a few times, however, when it came into play.
The old-timers didn't want to discuss some of the things with the female. It was unusual in the fact that I have answered the phone and have a farmer call and wouldn't even tell me what he wanted. He wanted to talk to one of the men because he didn't want to talk to a woman about having a calf.
Betty settled in at the Ada Clinic treating small animals, primarily cats and dogs, always with an occasional challenge or two.
The skunks, we used to get a gallon jar and put cotton with ether in it and hold their tail and stick them in the jar and shut the lid till they passed out, and then you pull them out and descended them. And they finally told us not to do it anymore because they can carry rabies without showing any signs, which was great because I'd get out behind the clinic to do it, but I always ended up smelling. So when we started on the ferrets, they started coming in, and this one brought in this ferret to be descended, and I thought, okay. So at the time, the going rate was $35 to descent one. So after I did that one, the next time someone called and wanted me to descend a ferret, they said, well, how much do you charge? I said, $75, and I never had to do another one. I've got scars all up and down. We had one woman brought in a German Shepherd for a rabies shot, and she was afraid of this dog to start with, and she came in there and I was getting a muzzle on him, and he grabbed me right here. He couldn't get his whole mouth on me, but he got me right there, and I was standing there bleeding, and she said, is this going to make him mean? I said, lady, this dog is already mean.
In many ways, Betty believes being a woman may have given her a certain advantage over some of her male colleagues.
It's hard not to get involved with everything that you're doing, too. But you got to feel what you're doing is, important, and that you can sympathize with them and everything. And that's why women are gotten into it more, I think. I've cried with owners and, when we had them die and stuff like that. So, and that's just part of who I am.
You know, the mothering instinct is still there, and I find women to be very, very sensitive and very nurturing. Not to say that men can't be, and a lot of women have a really strong natural bond to animals, which works its way out in the big scheme of I want to help animals.
Veterinary medicine, however, has little to do with gender. There are parts of it that require an iron will as well as an iron stomach.
We had the program at Bing where they would send the students in the afternoons that were interested in doing the different things. And we had this one girl that was just so good. She was very patient and everything. And she walked in there one afternoon and I was taking the bandage off of a dog's foot that had been caught in a trap. She left and never came back. So that's something she couldn't deal with. There's a lot of dirty work with it, and that just goes along with it.
After they sold their practice in Ada, Betty and Leon moved to Texas, where they continued to treat animals on a more limited basis. Eventually, she would retire to a small Texas town.
The last couple of years that I practiced, I did relief work, which is a big deal now. And I would go into these clinics that do exotics and all of that. And the last time I went in one, I always looked over what they were doing, you know, all their facilities and their drugs. And I opened this door where the medicine was kept, and I didn't know half of what was in there. And I thought, I've got to quit this. You know, I'm not doing this enough that I'm keeping up with what's going on, and I just didn't feel like I should be doing it anymore.
In 2007, Betty attended her 50th class reunion. They have remained a tight-knit group, getting together at least every 5 years since graduation. All these years later, it still doesn't matter that she was the only woman in the class. Times have certainly changed. Today, approximately 70 to 75% of Oklahoma State's veterinary students are female.
When I graduated from school, there were 364 women veterinarians in the United States and Canada. They graduate more than that a year now.
Our girls today are raised with the idea that anything a man can do, and all of these careers are available to them. Ladies like Dr. Self were pioneers, and they simply proved men wrong about what women could or couldn't do in the profession.
There were a lot of the women that came after me that were very active in all the different kinds of organizations, programs, and everything that promoted it a lot more than I ever did. But I feel like that I probably had some effect on it. It's not special anymore like it was at that time, so. But that's good.